Welcome back to Uncovered Cheating. If you enjoy this video, remember to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We're truly thankful to have each and every one of you here. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. We'd genuinely love to hear from you. Now let's dive into it. Life has this nasty habit of making you feel secure just before yanking the carpet right out from under your feet. I never thought my life could collapse so quickly. Especially not after 10 solid years of marriage. Building a home together from the ground up, and believing without a shadow of a doubt that Diana, my wife, would always stick with me. But I guess illusions can only last so long. Diana and I had our little habits. Pancake breakfasts every Sunday, quiet dinners at our favorite Italian restaurant every Friday, and no Saturday marathons where she'd always choose rom-coms while I'd pretend they weren't my thing. It might not have been flashy, but it was ours. We had settled into our life comfortably, or at least that's what I thought. But then the remarks began. Initially, they were subtle. She'd casually mention how I'd let myself go a bit, suggest a gym membership, or tease me playfully about my eating habits. At first, I laughed it off. Doesn't everyone gain some weight over the years? I was working long, stressful hours in finance. Comfort food and late-night drinks were simply part of the territory. But the comments didn't fade. Instead, they became sharper. She told me, "Tellin, I really need you to listen. I just can't feel attracted to someone who doesn't look after himself." That one stung. I looked at her across the table, waiting for her to smile. Maybe take it back as a joke. But she wasn't joking. "If you don't drop the weight, you're going to lose me," she said. That was the first sign of trouble. The first clear indication that my wife, my life partner, had already made up her mind. I should have fought back, should have argued and defended our marriage. But instead, I sat frozen in silence as she grabbed her purse and walked out the door. She didn't come home that night. When morning came, she returned, but not with an apology. Instead, she brought a suitcase. "I need space," she said coldly. "You have to decide what's more important to you, our marriage or your weight." That was the moment I lost her. Or maybe, looking back, I never really had her at all. Initially, I felt numb. Then the anger set in, followed by something far worse, a hollow emptiness. I turned to drinking. I'd stay awake late into the night, eyes locked on the front door, wishing she'd walk in and tell me she'd made a mistake. But she never did. Then one day, something clicked. I glanced at myself in the mirror and saw a tired, disheveled, beaten man staring back. Maybe Diana was right after all. Maybe I really had let myself slip. But then another thought struck me. Why in the world would I change for someone who clearly didn't love me anymore? So instead, I decided to change for myself. I cleared out my kitchen, joined a gym, and pushed myself through intense workouts. Soon enough, the pounds began to disappear. Muscles emerged. I updated my wardrobe, shaved my face clean, and got myself a fresh haircut. Ironically, right when I'd finally stopped waiting around for her, that's exactly when she showed up. There she stood at my door, suitcase at her side, wearing a confident expression, as though she had every right to waltz back into my life. Before I could even speak, a voice chimed in from behind me. "Oh, you must be Kellen's wife." Diana stared blankly, eyes darting past my shoulder toward Jolene. Tongue, striking, confident, and standing comfortably in my apartment wearing one of my shirts. And just like that, Diana understood the truth. She wasn't returning to the man she'd left behind. She was now face to face with someone who'd already moved on. Diana's reaction was swift and raw. Anger first, then disbelief, followed quickly by an attempt to reassert control. "Really, Kellen? This is what you've been up to while I was away?" Jolene just smirked, arms crossed confidently. "Didn't you leave him for someone else?" Jolene retorted. Diana froze. There it was, the truth laid bare. I leaned in closer, keeping my voice steady. "Tell me something, Diana. How'd that work out for you?" Her jaw tightened, but she remained silent. She didn't need to speak. I already knew the truth. My weight was never the real issue. That had just been her convenient excuse. The reality was, Diana had left for someone else. Someone she'd considered an upgrade. And now, that decision had completely backfired. This wasn't just some casual fling she'd had. Diana had been cheating on me for months. She'd met him at work. A charming, wealthy executive who promised her excitement, passion, and an escape from the mundane life she'd grown tired of. She thought she'd traded up, but instead, he'd used her and tossed her aside. Now, realizing her mistake, she'd come crawling back. But she wasn't returning to the broken man she'd left behind. No, she was facing the man she'd created. Diana had vastly underestimated me. She believed she could stroll back into my life, assuming I'd be here waiting, desperate to take her back. She'd mistakenly thought I was still the same guy she'd walked out on. But I'd spent every single day since her departure preparing for exactly this moment. I smiled, folding my arms confidently. Diana, it's time for you to leave. Her face twisted in frustration. We need to talk, she snapped. No, I corrected calmly. We don't. Jolene stepped forward, holding out an envelope. Divorce papers, she said clearly. You should sign them. Diana's fingers trembled as she took the envelope. Then, her expression shifted to panic. Wait, what the hell is this? She flipped frantically through the documents, her face going pale. Looking back up at me, fear crept into her voice. Tellin', you wouldn't, my grin widened. Hell, but I already have. Diana had counted on a clean break. Instead, I'd spent weeks crafting my own brand of revenge. She had left me for another man. So, I'd made sure she had absolutely nothing left to return to. While Diana had been away, I'd frozen our joint accounts, leaving her without financial resources. I'd taken full ownership of our home. Legally, the house was now solely mine, and I had gathered concrete proof of her infidelity. The perfect weapon for court. Most crucially, I'd secured complete custody of our daughter. Diana was about to lose everything. She staggered backward, gripping the divorce papers tightly. You can't do this. I stepped closer, dropping my voice to a firm whisper. It's already done. Then, I delivered the final blow. You thought I was weak. You believed you could walk all over me. You were convinced you'd left me for something better. But Diana, look at yourself now. You're backed, but you've got nothing left. She swallowed hard, visibly shaking. For the first time, I could see genuine fear in her eyes. She stood there helplessly, clutching the divorce papers like they were a death sentence. Her breath was uneven, her once proud posture crumbling rapidly. She was cornered, and she knew it. Her voice softened into a pleading tone. Kellen, please. Can we just talk about this? I tilted my head slightly, observing her like I barely knew who she was. Talk. You're the one who walked out of our marriage. You weren't interested in talking then. Why should I listen now? She hesitated, clearly searching for words. I made a mistake. Jolene snorted quietly from behind me, arms still folded tight. That's putting it lightly. Diana shot her an irritated glare before turning back to me. Kellen, I know I hurt you, but we can still fix this. We had something real. We had our daughter. Ah, there it was. She'd gone straight to playing the Celeste card, the one thing she knew I'd never turn my back on. But Diana wasn't the only one who'd evolved during our time apart. I gave her a cold, humorless smile. Our daughter? The same one you abandoned? The child you barely noticed, even when you were still here. Diana flinched as though I'd slapped her. I moved closer, lowering my voice to almost a whisper. You walked out, Diana. And while you were busy chasing fantasies, I made damn sure she'd never doubt if her dad loved her. I have full custody. You've got nothing. Her hands started trembling. No, that's impossible. I'll let the silence hang there, watching her slowly absorb what I'd said. She'd given up everything. She traded away her life with me for a lie, and now that lie had dumped her flat. Diana's silence spoke louder than words. The man she'd left me for, her so-called upgrade, had clearly burned her. I leaned casually against the doorframe, crossing my arms. So tell me, Diana, what happened? He dumped you, didn't he? She pressed her lips together tightly, refusing to answer. Jolene smirked knowingly. Of course he did. Cheaters never trade up. They just cycle through the same mistakes. Diana's face twisted into shame and anger. You have no idea what you're talking about. But I did know. While she was gone, I'd quietly investigated her little fling. It turned out the man she'd run off with wasn't just some executive. He was a married executive. When his wife learned the truth, he dropped Diana faster than a bad habit. Karma had already caught up with her before I'd even made my move. But I wasn't finished yet. Diana took a shaky breath, still clutching the divorce papers. I just need some time, Kellen. Please, we can fix this. I actually laughed out loud at that. You still don't understand, do you? This isn't a negotiation. Your time's already up. Her eyes narrowed suspiciously. What do you mean? I stepped closer, voice cold and hard as steel. While you were off chasing your new life, I wasn't sitting around mourning you. I was preparing. I made absolutely certain you'd have nothing left to return to. Your face paled visibly. You wouldn't. Oh, I did. Our house. It's mine now. Our bank accounts. Completely frozen. And your precious reputation. It's destroyed. I'd already sent proof of her affair directly to her boss. Diana had spent years cultivating an ambitious, flawless image at work. But corporate sharks don't trust people who betray their spouses. By now, she'd already have an email waiting. This wasn't just about losing a marriage. She was about to lose it all. Her phone buzzed urgently in her purse. She scrambled for it, her face growing paler as she read the message. Then, finally, she broke. Kellen, please. You don't have to do this. I leaned even closer, voice dangerously calm. But I really do. Diana was completely unraveling now. The phone fell from her trembling fingers, eyes darting around in panic, like a trapped animal. You're destroying my life. I shook my head slowly. No, Diana. You're the one who did that. She opened her mouth, ready to argue. But Jolene quickly stepped in, holding out a pen. Be smart for once. Just sign the damn papers. Diana clenched her jaw, clearly wanting to resist. But she had nothing left. Her lover? Gone. The career? Ruined. Kurhan? Mine. Our daughter? Completely mine. She lost everything, and she knew it. With trembling hands, she signed the papers. And just like that, Diana was officially out of my life forever. But as she stood there, utterly defeated, I decided to twist the knife one final time. You know the saddest part, Diana? I really did love you. I would have fought tooth and nail for us. But you tossed me aside like I meant nothing. Her lips parted slightly, her eyes shimmering with something that looked dangerously close to regret. But it was far too late. I stepped aside, motioning toward the door. Now leave. You're no longer welcome here. She hesitated for a moment, clearly debating saying something more. But finally, she picked up her suitcase and walked out, for good this time. I watched her leave, my emotions a confusing whirlwind inside my chest. I'd taken everything from the woman who betrayed me. But as I stood there, watching the door shut behind her, I felt absolutely nothing. Not sadness, not happiness, just emptiness. Because the truth is, when you finally get revenge against someone you once loved, the victory never tastes quite as sweet as you'd hoped. The door clicked shut, permanently sealing Diana out of my life. The silence that followed wasn't the relief I'd imagined. I should have felt triumphant. Diana was gone, ruined, erased from my world completely. And yet, as I stood staring blankly at the divorce papers she'd just signed, an empty feeling settled deep inside my chest. Jolene gently touched my arm, pulling me back to reality. You okay? I nodded slowly, letting out a long breath. Yeah, but I wasn't. Revenge had driven me for months, fueled every waking moment. Now that it was done, what else was there? What was I supposed to chase now? Diana was homeless, jobless, completely broke. She'd left me for a man who'd used her and tossed her aside. The career she'd poured everything into was now destroyed. Her perfect little life had crumbled within days. And the best part? She had nobody but herself to blame. Mutual friends told me she was crashing at some rundown motel across town. She'd reached out desperately to people she'd once called friends, but they'd turned their backs on her. She'd burned too many bridges, and now she was utterly alone. Good. Jolene was still here, on my side. She'd watched me dismantle Diana piece by piece, and hadn't flinched. Most women would have fled from such chaos. But not Jolene. She leaned casually against my kitchen counter, sipping her coffee. "So what's next?" she asked, meeting my eyes. "Now." I took a step toward her. Unmoved forward. She raised an eyebrow, smirking slightly. "With me?" I chuckled softly. "Guess you'll have to stick around and find out." Jolene didn't need me. She wasn't desperate or fragile like Diana. She had her own life, ambitions, dreams. Yet she chose to stay. And that meant something real. Just when I'd finally believed Diana had accepted her defeat, she made one final, desperate attempt at revenge. She showed up at my office unannounced. I was right in the middle of an important meeting when my receptionist buzzed my phone. "Sir," she said nervously, "there's a woman here insisting she see you. She claims it's urgent." I already knew exactly who was standing out there waiting for me. Sighing deeply, I rubbed my temples. "Tell her I'm busy." But the receptionist hesitated again. "She says she'll involve the police if you don't speak with her." I frowned at that. The police? What kind of game was Diana playing now? When I stepped into the lobby, Diana stood there, arms folded tight across her chest, eyes wide and frantic with desperation. "Did you really think you'd ruin my life and get away with it?" she snapped bitterly. I smirked calmly, completely unfazed. "I already have." She moved in closer, voice dropping dangerously low. "I could destroy you, Kellen. All it takes is a single accusation." I chuckled softly, shaking my head. "Are you really this desperate, Diana?" She narrowed her eyes fiercely. "Try me." I leaned in a bit closer, voice quiet but strong. "Go right ahead. But let me remind you, I still have all the receipts." Her face went pale immediately, because she knew without a doubt I wasn't bluffing. Every email she'd ever sent, every text, every inappropriate message she'd exchanged with the man she cheated with. I had it all saved and ready. If she wanted a fight, I was fully prepared to win. Without another word, she spun around and stormed out. And just like that, it was finally over, for good. After that day, I never heard from Diana again. She'd finally understood that she'd lost completely. And as for me, for the first time in years, I felt genuinely free. No more worrying if I'd ever be enough for someone. No more begging for love from a woman who'd never appreciated or deserved it. I was finally done. And honestly, I was much better off without her. Things with Jolene moved slowly. She wasn't just some rebound relationship. She wasn't a replacement for Diana. She was something entirely new. One evening, as we sat comfortably on my balcony looking out at the city lights, she turned toward me. "Tellin'," she said softly. I glanced over. "Yeah." She smirked playfully. "Are you ever going to tell me how you really feel?" I sighed gently, running my fingers through my hair. "I'm just not quite ready yet." She nodded, completely unbothered by my hesitation. "That's all right. I'll wait." Diana never would have waited. And that's when it finally clicked. I had found something truly real. Months went by, and I stopped thinking about Diana entirely. Until one random day, an email popped into my inbox. Dunh. I stared at the screen for a long moment, debating whether or not to even open it. Eventually, curiosity won out. "Tellin'," it began. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I had to say this. I'm truly sorry. I've lost everything. And only now do I realize how wrong I was to leave you. You were the best part of my life, and I was too blind to see it. Wherever you are, I genuinely hope you're happy. I really do. Goodbye. I sat quietly, eyes fixed on the words she'd written for a long, reflective moment. Then, without writing a single word back, I deleted her email. She belonged to my past, and I was finally busy living in my future.